So we'll begin with the devotional reading, which David's going to do for us.
The Lotus Sutra initial devotional reading as quoted in the Lam Rim. The learned always give without jealousy, sweet-sounding teachings with manifold meanings. Having thoroughly cast aside laziness as well, they are not dispirited to repeat teachings again and again. The learned give up all that is repugnant and cultivate the power of love toward those around them. Day and night they cultivate the supreme teachings. Using millions of examples, the learned bring joy and delight to those listening to their teachings. They never have the slightest desire for worldly gain. Not thinking of sustenance, hard or soft foods or drink, of clothing or bedding, or religious robes, or even of medicine to cure an illness. They ask nothing at all from those listening to their teachings. Rather, the learned always think, may I myself and all living beings achieve Buddhahood. And whatever teaching I impart in order to help the world is a completely favorable condition for my happiness. And I'll read the footnote from the Lam Rim. The Lotus Sutra in Sanskrit, Sutra on the White Lotus of the True Dharma. The Lotus Sutra is one of the most influential and venerated Buddhist Mahayana sutras. For many Buddhists in East Asia since early times, the Lotus Sutra contains the final teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha, complete and sufficient for salvation. Is arguably the most famous of all Buddhist texts. Two central teachings of the Lotus Sutra have been very influential for Mahayana Buddhism. The first is the doctrine of the One Vehicle, which says that all Buddhist paths and practices lead to Buddhahood, and so they are all merely skillful means, upaya, of reaching Buddhahood. Second is the idea that the lifespan of the Buddha is immeasurable, and that therefore he did not really pass on into final nirvana. He only appeared to do so as upaya, but is still active teaching the Dharma. The last statement is supported by both Mahayana Buddhism and Theosophy, that Buddha renounced nirvana.
So, thank you very much, David. So, any questions on the reading? Welcome, Satora. Any questions on the readings? If those on Skype would like to put them in the chat box. So the very last sentence we read about the renouncing of nirvana, this is clearly the Mahayana Buddhist idea, which the Buddha had, like all those from the dynasty of the masters, the White Brotherhood. They are all essentially Yamanikayas who have renounced Nirvana. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that. And that's really one of the chief characteristics of bodhicitta. You see, why do you renounce Nirvana? What's the motivation? Or you could say, what's the reason why you would want to renounce Nirvana? Because Nirvana is a wonderful, blissful state. Yes?
It can only be due to a wish to help others, otherwise all movements that would be keen to merge back into this.
Yes, that's it. So it's from that great love and compassion for mankind. There have been quite a lot of mothers who have had near-death experiences, and a voice has told them, when they're effectively dead, that their time hasn't come yet, and that they're needed, so that their family needs them, their children need them. And in the same, it's sort of a similar idea, you see, because the after-death state is, and Devachan is completely blissful. And if you read Dr. Moody's accounts in his books like Life After Death or Life After Life, they have those experiences where they renounce that great peace and joy and bliss that they find themselves in the after-death state, and quite reluctantly, actually, they come back into the body, into the pain of life. So it's a similar idea. So there's some points. The Bodhisattva ideal is pure altruism and selflessness. Yes, that's right. That's from Will. And Laura writes, while the teacher must never tire of sharing truth, the student must not be afraid of repetition. Yes, that's good. Repetition is said to be the art of learning. We must read and reread without peering about. Yes, peering about is a good expression for being too preoccupied with the details. So we were going to have a short talk from Will on Tsong-Khapa, just briefly to introduce us to Tsong-Khapa, for those of you who weren't perhaps at the previous meetings. Perhaps someone would like to read from the glossary. Would you like to read the entry on Tsong-Khapa?
Written also Tsong-Khapa, famous Tibetan reformer of the 14th century, who introduced a purified Buddhism into his country. He was a great adept in being unable to witness any longer the desecration of Buddhist philosophy by the false priests who made of it a marketable commodity, put a forcible stop thereto by a timely revolution and the exile of 40,000 sham monks and lamas from the country. He is regarded as an avatar of Buddha and is the founder of the Gelugpa Yellow Cap sect and of the mystic brotherhood connected with its chiefs. The tree of the 10,000 images, Khum Boon, has, it is said, sprung from the long hair of this ascetic, who, leaving it behind him, disappeared forever from the view of the profane.
Thank you very much. So he came in the 14th century. That was approximately 2,000 years after Buddha. He was an avatar of Buddha, or a reincarnation. And after 2,000 years, Buddhism had become quite degenerated. There were all sorts of tantric practices, wrong practices that had sprung up. A lot of the monks would lead a life of carelessness and indulgence, that they'd live off the community, not working. They were given quite a lot of money by the aristocrats and the government, because they wanted to. They were very powerful, and they wanted to keep them on side, and they paid them very well. And the Buddhist monks became very corrupt. So he, as it said, he exiled tens of thousands of them. Now, do you know about the Kumbum, the tree of 1,000 images? You know about that? In the monastery, the Kumbum monastery, there was a tree that grew up. It's supposed to be where a trace of his hair was left. Or in some traditions, it's where his mother buried his placenta, the placenta that he was born from. But this tree, every leaf on this tree was inscribed with Sanskrit. I think it was Sanskrit characters were written into the leaves. And I think the tree has now died, but it was there for hundreds of years, and people could read messages on the leaves. So that's the tree of 1,000 images. So that's a brief introduction to Tsong-Khapa. Yes.
It's interesting to draw a comparison between Tsong-Khapa and his reform to Tibetan Buddhism to that of Gautama Buddha with regards to how he intended to reform corrupted dogmatic Hinduism. Also how Jesus is said to have come to reform Judaism, etc. It should be comments at length in the teachings about how the various religious traditions all follow similar paths of corruption and crystallization into dogmatism with time, much like our physical body or vehicle, and highlighted the work of the brotherhood for the safekeeping of the esoteric knowledge to prevent it from miscorruption, and the need for cyclically reminding these eternal truths to humanity, and how Tsong-Khapa was credited with the cyclic impulse from the White Lodge of the effort in the last quarter of each century to give out what knowledge was allowed to be given out, as permitted by karmic law, in a language and context adapted to the current times.
Thank you very much.
And Vikash put a long quote from the book about the leaves of the Kumbum tree.
Oh,
Too long to read.
yeah, well, we perhaps read that after the meeting. That's very interesting. Now, this evening we've got some quotes in here which I'm sure will resonate with you. And before the meeting, I was thinking that we often read things in Theosophy that move us greatly. And then the next day we've forgotten. And I wondered why that is. And I think it's really because we don't believe, we don't have faith in our innate capacity as spiritual beings. We're too stuck in the material paradigm. See, because when we get moved by some beautiful passage, and we're going to read some from the Lam Rim tonight, you know, your heart sings and you get lifted up. And if you can retain that feeling somehow and retain that confidence that that these teachings are available to us 24 hours a day, not just when we're sitting down reading them. And try and preserve that sense of beauty and spirituality, then I think that's half the battle. So as we read through here, do think about that and try to think about how we can retain some of that feeling that we get from reading these wonderful texts. Yeah.
Vikash has asked the question relating to a point which has come up in all three of the Tsong-Khapa meetings, saying there seems that later there was a divergence in the Gelugpa order after Tsong-Khapa. Is there any connection between the Yogacharyas and the Gelugpa order?
Oh, that's a good question. Did everyone understand the question? So the Gelugpas were formed by Tsong-Khapa. They're the yellow cap tradition. And the question is, how do they relate to the Yogacharya school, which was founded by, was it Alexander? When was that?
Well, the history in the world only recognises one Yogacharya school, founded, I think, around 300 or 400, maybe later, AD in India. HPB says the earliest and real Yogacharya school was founded shortly after Gautama Buddha's lifetime, and the original Arya Sangha was direct disciple of Mahat of Buddha.
Yeah.
And she says that owing to the great persecution that existed originally of Buddhism in India by the Hindu Brahmins, the original Yogacharya school relocated to the Trans-Himalayan region. And from various things that are said, it seems that what we call the Trans-Himalayan Brotherhood, or Trans-Himalayan Lodge, or Trans-Himalayan Esoteric School of the Masters, is the original esoteric Yogacharya school, which HPB says preserved Buddha's own esoteric teachings.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
But on that point then, it seems that Tsong-Khapa, in light of what he was and what he did, had a link with him. But to what extent that link has been maintained is unclear and possible.
Yes, the Yogacharyas now are not extant, but they're not current in popular Buddhism. They're purely esoteric. So it seems like they've gone underground. They're withdrawn from the outer work in the world, at least temporarily, for a time.
Actually, I remember it said that Panchen Lama of the Gelugpa sect or school was always implied in Theosophy to have some type of connection with the Masters and Trans-Himalayan Brotherhood, much more so than the Dalai Lama, the two main lamas of the Gelugpa tradition. But there is no authorized Panchen Lama in the world.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, whenever HPV writes about the Yogacharyas, she's very complimentary. There's a few, if you want to have a look, you can look it up in the Voice of the Silence. There's some footnotes about them.
She says the Book of the Golden Precepts belongs to the Yogacharyas.
Right.
And the Book of Jen.
Doesn't that term mean a yoga teacher?
I suppose it does, isn't it?
An acharya is Sanskrit for teachers. So, but obviously a quite elevated teacher, advanced adept.
Yeah. Okay, friends, so unless there's any other questions about the initial reading, so that was from the Lotus Sutra. So let's go through on page 4. We'll read about cultivating bodhicitta through compassion. And the first subsection is having affection for all beings. Who'd like to read them, Chris?
Yeah. So having affection for all beings through compassion. Kama Lasila's second stages of meditation states. Moistened by love, your mind becomes like friable, fertile soil. You plant the seed of compassion, it grows easily and bountifully. Therefore, after you infuse your mind with love, cultivate compassion. Love mentioned here views living beings with affection, as if they were your dear children. By cultivating impartiality, you eliminate the unevenness in attitude that comes from the bias of your attachment and hostility. Your mind becomes like a good field. Kamala Sila says here that if you moisten your mind with the water of love, which views all living beings with affection, and you then plant the healthy seed of compassion, you will easily generate great compassion. Understand this to be an extremely important point. Cultivation of love. If you have that love, deities and humans will love you and will naturally gravitate towards you. Moreover, the conqueror, Buddha, defeated Mara's armies with the power of love. So love is the supreme protector, and so forth. Thus, although love is difficult to develop, you must strive to do so. The compendium of training says you should think wholeheartedly about the verses of the Sutra of the Golden Light, which discuss the cultivation of love and compassion. Further says that you should at least recite and meditate on the following verse from this sutra. Through the sound of the sacred golden light's great drum, may the sufferings of miserable realms, sufferings brought on by the Lord of Death, the sufferings of poverty, and all suffering be extinguished. In the 3 realms of the universe of 3 billion world systems. The stages of cultivating love are as follows. First, cultivate love towards friends, then cultivate love for persons towards whom you have mutual feelings. Next, cultivate love towards your enemies, then cultivate it gradually toward all beings.
Read the footnotes.
The first footnote, Kamalais Lasila is an Indian Buddhist scholar and monk who was famed for his role in the legendary Samyas debate in Tibet and for his prolific writings on Buddhist philosophy and practice. He mainly taught at Bihar, northeastern India, where Atisha later was to come to practice. As an example, see on Buddhist meditation, Theosophical magazine, June 2011, page 5, and also William Q. Judge's letter, number 4, page 6 and 7 of the letters that have helped me. Such great charity is a crucial step, and not one to be passed over thoughtlessly.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any comments on stuff? Is that Steve?
Maybe depends on your LT profile said. Do you think that this cultivation of love, because it is so inclusive, would seem to cure the illness of the great dying heresy of separateness?
Good question. What do you think?
Well, in a word, yes, because, love means you identify or you acknowledge the object of your love, and you cultivate kindliness and benevolence. Now, my question was, how can one cultivate love? I mean, apart from those you love or you like who are near to you, you have to start somewhere. I mean, you could start with the animal kingdom or plant kingdom. You have to have some.
Yes, paradoxically, what's not said here, you see, it says, the very last paragraph in the middle of page 4, it says, the stages of cultivating love are as follows. Cultivate love towards friends. Now, in other places, it says, cultivate love towards yourself first. And that's what Judge's letter, I think that's how Judge's letter begins. And then you go to your good friends, because that's easy. And then you go to the neutral people, and then you go to your enemies. And actually, if you try that, just while you're sitting, contemplating and meditating, show yourself love and compassion. I mean, in sort of not in a narcissistic way, but impersonally. Be generous to yourself, and then to your people you love, your family. And actually, the mother is spoken about there a lot. So that's good, because the mother symbol is obviously the loving, nurturing entity, force in the world. Yeah, absolutely.
In theory, to have one or just a few, or perhaps particularly one person or being or animal that it's one's duty and responsibility to care for and to look after and support can help to develop the heart faculty and quality. William Judge wrote, for example, that those theosophists who are married, or as we would say today, who have a partner relationship, shouldn't try to separate themselves from that, but instead staying in it and doing one's duty, instead develops heart qualities that you may not otherwise be able to develop in Samatha. But even if one doesn't have a partner, as David said, an animal, even a plant that one is looking after can help develop such qualities.
Yes, very good. Yeah, you're thinking about someone else or something else other than your own interests. And that's the beginning of it, really. But we'll read a lot more about this tonight, because it's a theme that keeps coming up. And as the footnote says, it's a crucial step. Well, in the Paramitas, we'll come to the Paramitas later, we put them in the Appendix. Do you know what the first Paramita is?
Charity.
Charity. And?
Love.
Love, immortal. Yeah, so pure love. Immortal love. It's no undying love. It's love for everything. You see, we have so cut off from that feeling today, because we're not with the animals that we farm are all done removed from us. And that's no good because this terrible suffering that we're putting the animals through now, through intensive farming, is disgraceful. We've lost that charity that farmers used to have. They used to look after their animals pretty well. Well, a lot of farmers still do, actually. Most of them are pretty good. There's a few of these big, huge mega farms that supply a lot of our food. And conditions are terrible. Bad for the environment. This comes from a lack of love for the animal kingdom. Okay, so were there any other questions on the text we read?
Just one point. What's the distinction between love and compassion? So, compassion is obviously a higher form of love, is it not? Or, let's say, more universal in its quality, and impersonal, or is it also personal, but a little more detachment?
It's a good question.
Because I think dana implies compassion, or developing that's quality or virtue.
Well, tell you what, let's just skip to the very last page, page 11. It's in the PDF, it's for those on Skype. If you go right to the very bottom of page 11, you've got so all these are Samatha practices, these 3 steps you can see in the text boxes. So concentration, self-awareness or mindfulness, and divine emotions. Well, they're all Samatha practices. Now those divine emotions, I think those would all be classified under love. And you can see that there's four divisions: friendliness, metta, or matri; karuna is compassion; mudita, sympathetic joy; and upekasha, tranquility, or equanimity. And I think you need all those to be a loving person. Any suggestions? That's just a thought. I think the question is a very good one about the difference between love and compassion. So that's one idea. So these are divine emotions. We'll come to them later because we'll read a little bit about this meditation practice, which is outlined here. It's the Samatha meditation, which is the first stage of meditation in Buddhism. Vipassana comes after that. So any other questions about what we just read, what Chris read?
There's a comment in the chat box
suggesting
that compassion is transcendent. I've forgotten how it works. A kind of transcendent respect for all of nature, not just human beings.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yes, that's good.
So that, in a sense, that's the universal quality of compassion. It's not partial to any.
That's right. Yeah,
one thing or another. It embraces everything. As far as this is possible.
Now, in the middle of page 4 that was read, it said that if you have love, deities and humans will love you in return. And you can see that. And naturally gravitate towards you. Moreover, the Buddha defeated Mara's armies. Do you remember Mara is the tempter? Mara tempts you to live wrongly, live selfishly, self-indulgence. It's all Mara. So he defeated Mara with the power of love. So love is the supreme protector. For although love is difficult to develop, you must strive to do so. This is Tsong-Khapa writing. So you can read the verses of the Golden Light, the Sutra of the Golden Light, which discuss cultivation of love and compassion. And there's that, it talks of, actually, this is very interesting, it talks about the sound of the golden light. The great drum of the golden light makes a sacred sound. I don't know what that's referring to. What do you think the drum of the golden light is?
It's the sun.
Could be.
The sun is a good example of how compassion is not an attribute. It's a natural thing.
The law of laws.
And everything gravitates towards the sun, minerals, animals.
Yes, the sun is a very good example, actually, because it's entirely impartial and it shines on everybody. And it gives love. It nurtures the whole world. Civilization will go out in a minute without the sun. Yes.
We almost made a comment, which was that it's in the Gospels, if I remember correctly, Jesus says the sun shines on the just and the unjust.
Yeah. The golden light's great drum and the sound. Well, in one of the newsletters, newsletter number 9, there was an article about the sound of the sun. The sun, in science, emits tones, vibrations. They flow through the ether to the earth. And you can listen to the sun, actually. Now you can decode those tones, demodulate them. Okay, so let's go on. Who'd like to read next? At the bottom of page 4. I'm afraid we can't ask our friends on Skype to read because we can't hear you, but hopefully you can hear us all right. David, would you like to read Theosophical quotes?
Theosophical quotes on love and charity. In the words of a true Philadelphian, an FPS, or fellow of the society, of the Theosophical Society, who has beautifully expressed it in the Theosophist. Men have been deceived and deluded long enough. They must break their idols and put away their shams and go to work for themselves. Nay, there is one little word too much or too many. For he who works for himself had better not work at all. Rather, let him work himself for others, for all. For every flower of love and charity he plants in his neighbour's garden, a loathsome weed will disappear from his own. And so this garden of the gods, humanity, shall blossom as a rose. A cup of cold water given in time to a thirsty wayfarer is a nobler duty and more worth than a dozen of dinners given away out of season to men who can afford to pay for them. Theosophical ideas of charity mean personal exertion for others, personal mercy and kindness, personal interest in the welfare of those who suffer, personal sympathy, forethought and assistance in their troubles or needs. We Theosophists do not believe in giving money, note well if we had it, through other people's hands or organizations. We believe in giving to the money a 1,000-fold greater power and effectiveness by our personal contact and sympathy with those who need it. We believe in relieving the starvation of the soul as much, if not more, than the emptiness of the stomach. For gratitude does more good to the man who feels it than to him for whom it is felt.
Thank you very much. Now, how does that personal touch give money a 1,000-fold greater power and effectiveness? I mean, that's not a trivial statement. I mean, if you gave £1 or £10 to someone, it could be 1,000-fold more effective and powerful if you do it in a particular way. I mean, what's the understanding there? Yes.
Because, well, it seems to imply true charity is not just the material side of it, such as the money or the food, but a less or more metaphysical aspect, which is that the one to whom you're giving the charity gets more benefit if they also receive tangibly a sense of love and concern from you.
Yes.
So we read these passages a few weeks ago in a Tuesday meeting. It was agreed that, especially in today's world where corruption in some countries prevents
What makes it impractical to give directly?
No, well, to some extent, but there was the point that in an ideal world, those who live in this country wouldn't need to be giving charity to those in other countries.
Oh,
Every country would take care of its own. But due to corruption and other things, that often doesn't happen. And so it seems nowadays, if one has the money, then it surely is a good thing to give charity to those in African countries, or otherwise they may not get any
help at all. Yeah. Do you know, sometimes you get a feeling from people, you may remember it for years afterwards, just a simple act of kindness from someone, maybe it could be someone you've never met before, and it makes such an impact on you because it has that particular quality, I think, which HPB is getting at. You see, if you go and you give someone on the street £5 or £1 or whatever it is, you know, he may just put it in his pocket and that's the end of the transaction. But if you interact with them in a meaningful way, he may remember that for months. You know, you might cheer him up or joke with him or do something, and you don't have to give him a penny. And that will mean a lot more to him. It's what she says about relieving the starvation of the soul. Yeah.
There's a good comment on this in the chat box from Laura, who says, the Gita classifies charity, Bhagavad Gita classifies charity into sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic charity. Those who give away things out of place and out of season, all scornfully, are the ones in whom tamas quality predominates. How many times have we been guilty of tamasic giving?
Yeah, so it's not what's given, but the way it's given, and the encouragement and love that you give to that person. You know, you're giving them 5 minutes, 10 minutes of your time. You know, when you lift them up and strengthen them morally and emotionally. It's a lot more helpful than giving a few pounds or dollars. Okay. Any other comments on anything we've read?
I just wanted to add that in reality, money has no value anyway. You're not actually giving anything.
Yes, well, it has value. How do you mean if you're starving, then you can get something with it?
Yeah, but that's because the person transacting with you agrees that it has value. In reality, there's no value to it, it's food that has the value. So give them food instead, rather than giving them money.
Yeah, that's much better.
The other thing is, it reminded me of that saying, teach a man to fish, never need your charity again.
Give him feed him a fish.
Yeah.
When he's hungry, you feed him for one day.
Yeah.
To teach him how to fish, you can feed himself for life.
So that isn't Buddhistic, and that's apparently from Confucius.
Oh.
That's Confucian, is it? Okay, let's carry on. Now we're going to read a commentary, just to put this, what we've been reading into context. So it's from the introduction of the Lam Rim. I'm trying to understand, because the Lam Rim is called the Great Treatise on the Graded Path, and there's 3 grades that Tsong-Khapa was instructed in his visions when he was writing the Lam Rim. A lot of it was given to him in visions. And he was instructed to do it for 3 grades of people, which cover all possibilities, really. So let's read this. Who'd like to read? Would you like to mention? Yeah.
The Lam Rim can be divided into a few simple sections. First is a preamble on the nature of the instruction. Second, on spiritual friendship, Kalyana Mitra, and practices mind training and purification. Footnote says spiritual friendship is an essential component of spiritual exploration and practice. Shall I read them? In the Pali Upada Sutta, Lord Buddha says to his disciple Ananda, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. When a monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades, he can be expected to develop and pursue the noble Eightfold Path. And then this is, as we said, from the translator's introduction to the Lam Rim. Others are concerned with the graded path suitable for the last or lowest category of persons, namely those who delight in the pleasures of the round of existences, samsara, and strive merely for a fortunate future existence in a heavenly world still belonging to the world of samsara. Then a section dealing with the middling category of persons, those who develop a distaste for existences and seek liberation for their own sake. After that, the following sections of the great treatise, Lam Rim, are all devoted in principle to the highest category of persons, that is, to those who are characterized by compassion, karuna, and therefore strive to achieve awakening, bodhi, in order to bring an end to the pain of all sentient beings. They accordingly train themselves in generating the mind of awakening, bodhichitta, in its 2 forms of aspirational vow, pranidhana chitta, and engagement, prasthana chitta. This high form of training relates in particular to the first 4 perfections of the Bodhisattva, perfections being Paramitas, namely generosity, dana, liberality, ethical discipline, shila, patient receptivity, kshanti, and energy, virya. The last two in this classic set of 6 perfections, meditation, dhyana, and discriminative understanding, prajna, have then been treated in 2 very long and detailed sections of the great treatise, or Lam Rim. In them is carefully examined the true nature of fixation meditation, as Tsong-Khapa understands it, in which he shows to be far removed from any simple quietism or ataraxia, Greek word literally no disturbance, and far removed from cataleptic fixation or trance, and of analytical meditative realization made up of prajna, or analytical investigation, pratyaveksha, as opposed to unbridled intellection and mental activity, together with the 2 corresponding factors of tranquility, samatha, and the insight, Vipassana, and their very close interrelation. These twin sections on tranquility and insight are thus the most detailed, the most difficult, and doubtless also the most groundbreaking in the great treatise. It is here, above all, that the very remarkable contribution made by Tsong-Khapa to Buddhist thought and to philosophy and spirituality in general is revealed. The first of these 2 sections is accordingly nothing less than a searching and penetrating treatise on the subject of tranquility, samatha, involving both bodily and mental calm, prashra, the contrary of turbulence, doshtulya, that examines samatha in the greatest detail with a view to defining its relation to insight, vipassana, and to establishing just how these 2 factors alternate at certain stages of practice, and then mutually reinforce each other. Major topics treated in this context are attention or mindfulness, smriti, awareness, samprajanya, mentation, manasikara, composure or equanimity, affection, natural quietude, prashata vahita, aptitude for spiritual and philosophical operation, karmanyata, and non-conceptualization, nirvikalpa. Special attention is given to the practices that need to avoid torpor and drowsiness, styanamita, and laxness, asceti, marked by slackness, as well as agitation or udakya, marked by excessive tension or effort.
Thank you very much. So does that put things into context? So we should, at the bottom of page 5, it says, we accordingly train ourselves in generating the mind of awakening, which is this bodhichitta, in its 2 forms of an aspiration and an engagement with the world, not retiring from the world. And then this higher training relates to the Paramitas. Let's just turn to the Paramitas briefly and read them. So it's in Appendix A, which is on page 10. We'd like to read the Paramitas, which you can do.
These portals lead the aspirant across the waters on to the other shore, Nirvana. Each portal hath a golden key that openeth its gate, and these keys are: 1. Dana, the key of charity and love immortal. 2. Shila, the key of harmony in word and act, the key that counterbalances the cause and the effect, and leaves no further room for karmic action. 3. Kshanti, Shanti, patience, sweet, that naught can ruffle. 4. Varang, indifference to pleasure and to pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. 5. Virya, the dauntless energy that fights its way to the supernal truth, out of the mire of lies terrestrial. 6. Dhyana, whose golden gate, once opened, leads the Narjal, saint adept, towards the realm of Sat eternal and its ceaseless contemplation. 7. Prajna, the key to which makes of a man a god, creating him a bodhisattva, son of the Dhyanis. Such to the portals are the golden keys. Before thou canst approach the last, O weaver of thy freedom, thou hast to master these paramitas of perfection. The virtues transcendental, 6 and 10 in number, along the weary path. The Voice of the Silence, pages 47 to 48, 1889, translated by H.B. Blavatsky.
Great, thank you very much. So there are actually 7 paramitas there. HPB added one that in the exoteric system is not there. The 6, they say there's 6 for that middle one, number 4, Vairagya, seems to be added because that's part of the esoteric, the secret one.
So when we read 6 and 10, so it's the 6 and there's a 10 further.
Yeah, the 10, there's another 4 for the monks. I forget what they are now, things like sounds.
Oh, so an extra 4.
Skill in action.
Yes. Well, Theravada speaks of 10 paramitas only for everyone.
Okay.
Buddhism 6. Seemingly the real esoteric Buddhism 7. Bhiklash says that the 10 paramitas, presumably this is taken from Theravada Buddhism, are generosity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, equanimity.
That's a slightly different formula. I think that's probably, is that the Theravada one?
I assume so.
Yes, it's not quite the same as the Mahayana.
Mahayana speaks of 6.
So, if you compare the Samatha meditation practices, you'll find that they're quite similar to the first four of these, the Samatha training, and the Vipassana, the insight meditation, is closer to the last 3 because really the insight comes from your control and polishing of the mind. See, because unless your mind is still and clear and like a crystal, then it's not going to be able to get any insight into the real nature of things. So these first 4 practices give you that. See, and then you've got number 5, Virya, fights its way to the supernal truth out of the mire of lies terrestrial. So you've left your consciousness behind. It's your consciousness no longer bogged down in these terrestrial delusions, Mara and Maya. And then number 6, dhyana, whose golden gate leads the adept towards truth, sat eternal. And then prajna is this complete realization where you become a bodhisattva. Okay, so let's go back to page 6. So, unless there are any questions on the actual page, sorry, on what we've read up to page 6. So let's go, now this is Tsong-Khapa on a typical meditation session. He gives you the anatomy of meditation. This is the overview at the start of the chapter. And each chapter in the Lam Rim begins with this overview, and he gives you a little sentence or phrase of exactly what the chapter covers. And this is the one on the meditation session. So let's read that. Would you like to read, David?
On the meditation session from chapter 5, overview at the start of the chapter. 2. A brief indication of how to sustain the meditation, the actual way of sustaining the meditation. What to do during the actual meditation session, i.e. preparation, the actual session, how to sustain the meditation in general, how to sustain the meditation specifically, what to do at the conclusion, what to do in between meditation sessions, restraining the sensory faculties, acting with vigilance, the foundations upon which you act, acting vigilantly with respect to the foundations, appropriate diet, how to practice diligently without sleeping at the wrong time, and how to act properly at the time of sleep.
So that's an excerpt we're going to read.
What to do in between meditation sessions. Furthermore, learn the 4 preconditions, which are causes that readily produce the paths of serenity and insight. Restraining the sensory faculties, acting vigilantly, appropriate diet, and striving to practice without sleeping at the wrong time, and acting properly at the time of sleep. When you achieve stabilizing meditations, such as meditative serenity, you create a serviceability that allows you to place your mind on one object of meditation according to your wish. If those whose minds cannot stay on one object of meditation analyze repeatedly while they are trying to achieve a stabilizing meditation, they will be unable to produce a mental stability. Hence, in this case, they should practice stabilizing meditation. Next, train broadly in the 6 perfections. In particular, train well in meditative stabilization, the heart of meditative serenity, in order to make your mind capable of being set on a virtuous object of meditation, according to your wish. The elders' Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment says that you should develop meditative serenity for the sake of producing the super knowledges. He is simply giving an example. In other contexts, he says that you should develop serenity for the sake of producing insight. Therefore, achieve serenity, mainly for the purpose of insight. Then, in order to cut the bonds of the conception of the 2 selves, make a philosophical determination of the meaning of emptiness, which is selflessness. After sustaining an unmistaken method of meditation, achieve insight, the heart of wisdom.
We just pause there briefly. Now, that second to last sentence you read, in order to cut the bonds of the conception of the 2 selves. Now, I think we spoke about the sense of separateness. I think you asked about it, a question about it at the beginning. I think that's what this is doing. It's cutting the bonds of the conception of the 2 selves, so you're uniting yourself. There's no separateness anymore. Now that Samatha practice that we spoke about, when you be kind to yourself, you be kind in your mind, you meditate lovingly, giving good thoughts, good wishes to yourself, to your friends, the neutral and the enemy. I mean, that's part of that, isn't it? You see, it's part of that selflessness. Now, you seem to be able to get that through making a philosophical determination of the meaning of emptiness. Sunyata, the Buddhist idea of sunyata, that everything is empty of reality apart from the ultimate reality, everything else is illusion. That's the idea that's given in the Voice of the Silence. But that seems to promote selflessness. Yes, Martin?
I was going to say that in Buddhism, that's especially in Tsong-Khapa's writings, the emptiness idea is that there is no ultimate reality, or the ultimate reality itself is just an emptiness.
Yes, there's no...
I mean, Theosophical disagrees.
Oh, I see. Well,
The Madhyamaka
it's taken a bit too much to an extreme. But I think the less extreme version of it is good. Do you remember we read that in the Voice of the Silence about where it is now? The Buddhist has disdain for physical life, almost a contempt for it. I thought I could find it in his voice. It doesn't seem to be here.
Physical life.
Yes, for get the words in the voice of the science, but for the objective universe, they're not moved by good or bad things. It's part of Vairagya, indifference to pleasure and pain. Yes.
But presumably it can't be the way it sounds, because the non-bodhisattva, the Pratyeka Buddha, part of their practice is about cultivating a disgust with the world and looking upon everything in the world as foul and contemptuous. But the Bodhisattva surely doesn't do that. The Bodhisattva loves this world and the beings in it to the extent that we want to keep returning to it, to help it. So it's hard to know what to make of such differences.
Yes, well, not sure they love the world so much. They love the beings, the entities, the souls.
But I mean, the world itself in reality is an entity. It's a living thing that should be mentioned. Otherwise, we wouldn't care about the environment and ecology.
Well, the idea of Gaia. Well, yes, the world is an entity, but it's not the physical thing that we love. See, we mustn't get too attached to the physical, because that's just the outer garment, which grows old, and eventually this world will disappear, like the moon. So we shouldn't be too attached to it. Yeah.
I think this idea of emptiness, of selflessness, refers to being empty of concepts, of false ideas, beliefs, traumas, all the mental detritus that accumulates with in the aphorisms of the mental deposits.
Mental deposits. Yeah.
So, in other words, creating space within, or stillness within, to reflect the higher light. You're getting out of the way. You're not blocking your own light, as it says. And again, this idea of disgust with the world, or isn't that the idea behind renunciation?
That's right.
Sannyasis, that in order to pursue a spiritual goal, they renounce any physical or material or value of anything physical or material.
That's right.
The everyday things which most people actually live for.
But you see, what you said at the beginning, just as to introduce the session, is that you either have confidence and faith and belief in yourself as a spiritual being, or you put all your eggs in the exterior world, in the personality and the house and the car and all the other things that go with it. You see, I mean, you've got to choose which camp you're in. Ultimately, you're in the materialist camp, or you're in the spiritual camp. And most of us have a leg in both, a foot in both camps. But ultimately, we must try to
Shift the balance to the higher.
That's right.
Higher aspect.
Yeah,
Or the main focus.
We've got to let go.
Because doesn't it also say, take care of the being, or the spiritual side, and everything else will be taken care of. Will be seek you first the kingdom.
That's right.
And all these things shall be added unto you. So that shows that the focus on the lower, the mundane, is actually a false focus. It's a false way of living.
Yes, it is.
It's a delusionary way, and actually not, well, the opposite of the higher path, or the inner path. It's an inner path, which will take you on the true path.
But you see, if you think about the masters, they've made this interior connection, permanent connection with our spiritual selves. Now that brings with it what the Buddhists call skillful means. You see, they've become, Master is supremely skillful, he's perfected all his being, physically, psychically, mentally, great intellect, great compassion. He's perfect, but that perfection brings with it all the power of the true self. You see, he becomes a great being, I mean, like great artists or great poets or musicians,
An enlightened being.
yeah, they're tapping into something much, much greater than themselves, than the personality. They're tapping into their individuality, their ego, which has all the experience of countless previous incarnations. All those good things, all that intelligence and skill and everything that
experience.
That's right, that you've had in previous lives. You see, you can tap into. Okay, so we're running a bit late. Yeah.
I think it's a very closely guarded secret, but there isn't a clear, concise discipline explaining how to access that memory.
Well, it comes spontaneously, doesn't it? It springs up spontaneously in you. You see, as David said, you try to make that higher connection.
Is what we have, for instance, on page 11, I mean, is that would you say that's a pointer towards that? Or?
Which bit on page 11?
So, concentrating the mind, self-awareness, divine emotion.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's that. If you follow that program, then you're halfway there. That's the Samatha program. It's actually pretty simple. In essence, it's quite simple to do that. That article, by the way, it's printed in the newsletter number 9, which was on meditation. It's got a lot of explanation about how to do these things.
That's online.
Yeah, it's online. It's under the ULT newsletters drop-down menu. Yeah, there's some copies in the back newsletter. Okay, so let's leave the next page. Well, we could read, not sure where it's from. Oh, well, it's the commentary on the middle way. Let's read that at the top, it's rather nice. Who'd like to read?
Which page is that?
The top of page 8, spreading the broad white wings.
Spreading the broad white wings of reality and conventionality. The royal geese, escorted by the flock of living beings, fly on the winds of virtue to supremacy, on the far shore of a Buddha's ocean-like qualities, taking up the bodhisattva vow through abiding in the practice of refuge, higher ethical discipline, and the basis of the aspirational spirit of enlightenment. Practice properly in stages with what ability you have. All the deeds of the bodhisattvas, the 6 perfections and the like. Also cultivate the heart of wisdom and method, insight, meditative serenity, and the unification. From Lam Rim, Volume 1, Chapter 8, page 136 to 9. the three types of persons.
Thank you very much. So the aspirational spirit of enlightenment, do you remember what that is? You mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting. The spirit of enlightenment, bodhichitta. So that's bodhichitta.
And the bodhisattva vow, not to hurt any being, something along those lines.
Bodhisattva vow, well, the one we know is the Kuan Yin pledge. Do you remember that?
Oh, never to, basically, to renounce nirvana until every being has been enlightened.
That's right. We try to memorize the pledge. A lot of students memorize it. Does anyone remember it? Never shall I
Seek for personal salvation.
seek nor receive personal individual salvation.
I have saved every soul.
That's right.
Although that Kuan Yin pledge or vow is important in the Theosophical world, it's not something that's particularly well known or referred to in Buddhism. The Bodhisattva vow itself is, and as far as I know, somewhere Tsong-Khapa has laid out the wording more previous to the Bodhisattva.
Oh,
Because
okay.
modern Paramitas give reference to it. But I would assume that ultimately the exact words are not the most important thing. It's the inner commitment and rooting with which one meets such a thing.
Sorry, so when it says to take every soul with you, does that mean only in your Manvantara or in subsequent Manvantaras as well?
Yes, I assume where we are on Earth. So the Manvantara is a complete cycle of 7 rounds, isn't it? All those souls are connected with the Earth. Begins. So let's just finish off. We'll read the last page and a half. Now, why do we have to think about suffering? Why is knowledge of suffering so important? Because this next chapter is about suffering. Why is a knowledge of suffering important?
We know the causes of it. Avoid it.
Yes, so you can avoid it.
Empathize with others.
Empathize with others. Yeah. Exactly. So we should try to understand suffering and its effect on people. So let's read that. Do you want to carry on with?
The 8 types of suffering. 2. Training the mind in the stages of the path shared with persons of medium capacity. A. The mental training. 1. Identifying the mind intent on liberation. 2. The method for developing the mind intent on liberation. A. Reflection on suffering and its origin. 1. Reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of psychic existence. A. Showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the 4 truths. B. The actual meditation on suffering. 1. Reflection on the universal suffering of psychic existence. A. Reflection on the 8 types of suffering. 1. The suffering of birth. 2. The suffering of old age. 3. The suffering of illness. 4. The suffering of death. 5. The suffering of encountering what is unpleasant. 6. The suffering of separation from what is pleasant. 7. The suffering of not getting what you want. 8. The suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates. Reflection on the 8 types of suffering. Therefore, the Buddha says that any achievement of virtuous quality in the three vehicles requires a state of mind that is both, one, an actual meditative serenity, or a similitude of it, which rests one-pointedly on its virtuous object of meditation without wandering from it, and two, an actual insight, or a similitude of it, which carefully analyzes a virtuous object of meditation and distinguishes both the real nature and the diversity of the phenomena. Similarly, the sutra unraveling the intended meaning, Sandhi Nirmakana Sutra, says, Maitreya, you should know that all the virtuous qualities, mundane or supra-mundane, of the Saravakas, the Bodhisattvas or the Tathagatas, result from meditative serenity and insight. Construe meditative serenity and insight, here as including both actual serenity and insight, and states of mind that are similar to them. For it is not certain that all of the good qualities of the three vehicles develop as a result of actual serenity and insight.
Thank you. So we have to be serene when dealing with things that are extremely unpleasant, like sickness, death, old age, encountering what is unpleasant, separation from what is pleasant. It's a bit like a nightmare, isn't it? All the worst things in life coming to you. But you need to be completely at rest in yourself, unfazed by all those things. So then Vairagya, yes, that's right. The fourth golden paramita. So by meditating on them, you can disarm them of all pain. Yes. Tim.
Just a comment in chat box regarding your earlier question of why is it important to understand suffering?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And ULT profile, which I think is Steve tonight, said, I think that the knowledge of suffering, one, awakens us to the need of meaning, while two, allotting an awareness of the need of equanimity in all situations. Thus one is moved to the application of the Paramitas.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, suffering really gives you meaning. I mean, if you go to a funeral, come away from it, and life seems very different afterwards. And especially if it's sort of a good friend or a family member, you put in a very different frame of mind. All the frivolous stuff gets shown up for what it is.
Could we define what is meant by the three vehicles? Does it mean body, mind, and soul, for example?
Where is that?
It's the first line on page 9. Any achievement of a virtuous quality in the three vehicles requires a state of mind that is both.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Martin?
When the previous meetings on Lam Rim, we read that by the three vehicles, Tsong-Khapa, and Buddhism means the three types of approach that people have. There's the Shravaka, the Pratyeka Buddha, and Buddhism.
Okay.
Because of the three.
Thank you. Yeah, you remember what the Shravaka is?
The listener or the acoustic coil?
Yeah, so we're at the Shravaka stage.
The beginner stage.
Yeah, and the one after that?
The questioner.
More the Getai, the ascetic, Shramana, the exerciser, which Tsong-Khapa relates to the Praktika Buddha, as you said. So those ones who are engaged in practical performance of release, really, of achieving nirvana. And then the third one, is Bodhisattva.
In the previous Lam Rim session, the description of bodhicitta as the medicinal tree was mentioned. Something to do with the seed of love.
Yeah, it's on the front cover.
Plant the seed of love, and that's how the tree grows.
Yeah, it's on the front page.
Something like that, or is it the tree is the product of the seed of love?
Yeah, do you want to read it?
Where is it?
At the front cover.
Oh yeah. Tsong-Khapa calls bodhicitta, which actually means enlightened consciousness. A medicinal tree seeded from wishing love and compassion. Practice of tranquility is Samatha, and insight is Vipassana. These are all the further perfections of bodhicitta.
But there's a circular arrangement there where the bodhicitta is fed by tranquility and insight, which then mutually reinforces bodhicitta. It goes round and round. It's like a virtuous circle. So you develop tranquility and insight, and then this wishing love and compassion.
So this idea of a medicinal tree implies a healing force, healing power to heal the soul or to heal one being.
Now we've come to the end. Yes.
So a number of people are signing up to help us.
Yes, we've come to the end. Let's just finish with the summing up of the excellence of the practice. Who'd like to read that?
Yeah, on the last page.
Yeah, on page 9. Yeah, we've overrun a bit.
It's summing up. The 7 causes and effects are the spirit of enlightenment, from which perfect Buddhahood arises.
It's bodhicitta.
This spirit arises from the wholehearted resolve. This resolve arises from compassion. Compassion arises from love. Love arises from the wish to repay your mother's kindness.
Mother's plural.
Yes. The wish to repay their kindness arises from recollecting their kindness, and the recollection of their kindness arises from recognizing all beings as your mothers. This training comes from the lineage descended from the great elder Atisha, the influential Bengali teacher of the 11th century, who was one of Tsong-Khapa's greatest inspirations. Have you heard that name before?
Atisha, yes. So this 7 causes and effects, they're like a nidana. One produces the other. So it seems to start with this record. You've got to recognize all beings as your mother. So on that thought, we'll call the meeting to an end. Sorry, we're a bit overrun rather. But do look through this again and start with the Samatha meditation practice. It's laid out on page 11. In 3 steps. And the 3rd step has 4 compartments to it. So thank you all very much. Thank you to our friends on Skype.